Okay, so now that we have run our ANOVA test and we've seen that there are significant differences, we can probe to find where those differences actually are. And to do that, we will run a post hoc analysis for our two main effects of hair and clothing. So you'll scroll down to post hoc tests in the menu pane, and we'll start with hair, the two-level independent variable. And we'll scroll down and we want to flag significant comparisons. So what that's going to do is give an asterisk next to each of the significant tests. And we'll get the marginal means as well. So we will move hair over there and look at the results. So let's start by looking at the marginal means. So curly hair was coded as 1 and straight hair was coded as 2. So this is the marginal mean for curly hair, and this is the marginal mean for straight hair. What this tells us is that regardless of what type of clothing, any of the candidates with curly hair were perceived on average of being dependable at about 3.97 out of 6. And regardless of what clothing the straight hair candidate was wearing, they were perceived as 4.68 on the dependability scale. And so we can see just by looking at these that there is probably a difference, but we can run the post hoc test to see where that, or to see if that difference is actually significant. So that's up here at the top. So we did get a significant difference. And the way that we read this is just by imagining there's an invisible minus symbol here. So this is the average of curly hair minus the average of straight hair. Equals negative 0.707, or 3.974 minus 4.681 equals negative 0.707. The way that we interpret that is that curly hair was perceived as more dependable, or less dependable, than straight hair. Or straight hair was perceived as more dependable than curly hair by about 0.7 points out of 6. So almost 1 full point, and that's a big enough difference for that to be significant. We'll do the same thing for the 3-level independent variable of clothing. So we'll just go back over to the menu. Under post hoc test, we will move clothing over, and we'll get the marginal means as well. And we'll look at the results. So let's look at the marginal means first. So 1 was coded for professional clothing, 2 is casual clothing, and 3 is revealing clothing. So regardless of whether the candidate had curly or straight hair, if they were wearing professional clothes, they were perceived as 5 on the scale of 1 to 6 for dependability. Regardless of hairstyle, if they wore casual clothes, they received a 4.5 on average. And regardless of hairstyle, if they wore revealing clothes, they received a 3.4 on average. And so just looking at these means, we can see that there probably is a difference. The difference between professional clothing and casual clothing is only about 0.5 points. So that might not be big enough of a difference for it to be significant, but we'll have to look at the post hoc test to see if that's significant. But there's definitely a difference in the revealing clothing. It's definitely far lower than the professional clothing. So let's look at the post hoc test. So we do have 2 significant tests. The way you read this is the same as the hair, so there's an imaginary minus symbol here. So this is professional clothing minus casual clothing equals about 0.5, and that difference is not significant, so it's not a big enough difference to say that wearing professional clothing or wearing casual clothing indicates changes in dependability. There is a difference between professional clothing and revealing clothing, and that difference is 1.57. So professional clothing, the average minus the average of revealing clothing is 1.57, or we can read that as professional clothing were perceived as more dependable than revealing clothing by about 1.57 points on average. The difference between casual clothing and revealing clothing was also significant at about 1 point. And so if the candidate was wearing casual clothing, they were perceived as more dependable than the candidate wearing revealing clothing by about 1 point on average. So that would be the main effect of our 3-level IV of clothing. And so now we'll need to probe the interaction effect, which I'll do in the next video.